Section 1. Video 13. Modules. 1. We will explain why JavaScript modules, also called ES modules, are necessary. 2. We will show you an example of applying a module to an HTML page. 3. We will explain the difference between named exports and default exports. 4. We will show you how to use a module object to effectively create a namespace when importing code. In the early days, most of the usage of JavaScript was to do isolated scripting tasks, providing a bit of interactivity to your web pages where needed, so large scripts were generally not necessary. Fast forward a few years, and we now have complete applications being run in browsers, with a lot of JavaScript. It has therefore made sense in recent years, to start thinking about providing mechanisms for splitting JavaScript programs up into separate modules, that can be imported when required. Most modern browsers have started to support module functionality natively, so that browser clients can optimize the loading of modules, instead of us having to use a library, and perform extra client-side processing and round trips to the server. To demonstrate how to use modules, we have applied a module to an HTML page. Within our base modules folder, we have an index.html file and an index.js file, and a subfolder called utils, which has a file called money.js inside. Currently showing in Atom Code Editor is the index.html page. We have added a script tag to the bottom of the body of the page. Note that the script tag has a type attribute, with the value module. To test our modules locally on our development machine, we need to run a local web server. For example, you can run a local web server from the base folder of your project in Terminal. Use the command npx-serve to start a web server, and then navigate to localhost, port 5000, in your browser, to test the modules. Now, we will close the index.html file in Atom. We will split the screen vertically, and put the money.js file in the bottom window pane of our Atom Code Editor. In the top window pane, we have the index.js file. We will start coding in the money.js file. First, we will add a utility function for calculating the compound interest on a principal amount of dollars invested. Next, we will add a utility function that takes a number representing a dollar amount, and converts it into a nicely formatted string. Don't worry about the details of these functions. We will just use them to illustrate exporting and importing modules. There are several ways to export the functions in this file. One way to export the functions is by putting the function names within curly braces at the bottom of the file, preceded by the export keyword. Now, move to the top window pane in Atom, which is our index.js file. We can import the functions from the money.js file by using the import keyword, followed by the function names within curly braces. This is followed by the keyword from, and then the path to the file from which we are importing. Let's look at the path. The dot at the start of the path string indicates that we are specifying a relative path, starting from the current folder, then moving down into the utils folder, in which the money.js file can be found. We can now use the utility functions within the index.js file. Let's find out the amount that $10,000 grows to when invested at 5% interest, for 30 years. Now, let's format the number returned by that function. Let's print the results to the console. You can see in the console that the investment grows to over $44,000. The exports we currently have in money.js are called named exports. We can also specify a default export, using the export default keywords. We will make the format amount function a default export, instead of a named export. Note that only one default export is allowed per module. Within index.js, we need to import code, which has been exported with a default export, in a different way. We specify the import without the curly brackets when it comes to code exported as a default export, and we put it before any named variables. Check that it works in the browser. Sometimes importing modules can lead to naming conflicts. One good way to avoid naming conflicts is to import code inside a module object. First, we will revert back to using only named exports in money.js. Going back to index.js, we can import code inside a module object with the following syntax. This grabs all the named exports available inside money.js, and makes them available as members of an object called money, effectively giving it its own namespace. Check that it works in the browser. To summarize, we explained why JavaScript modules, also called ES modules, are necessary. We showed you an example of applying a module to an HTML page. We explained the difference between named exports and default exports. We showed you how to use a module object to effectively create a namespace when importing code. This is the end of section 1. In the next section, we will introduce the concepts of React in a step-by-step way.